Hey guys, Brian Stevens here with the National Real Estate Post. I have Barry Habib. I think you guys know what we're going to be talking about. It's kind of what everybody's talking about in the country right now: inflation, the Feds, rates, and what I perceive to be insanity around all this. Now, last time we spoke, I was looking for some much needed clarity, and I don't know if I got it because I don't know if there's clarity to be had right now, and that's my big question. So, my first question is based on the type of inflationary numbers that we've seen from the Fed and the topsy-turvy kind of seemingly changing of opinions that the Fed comes out with right now, are we losing confidence in the Fed's ability to really understand and navigate the troubled waters we have in front of us with our economy?
Yeah, I think we've lost confidence in the Fed for a while now. A lot of people have, because they create these boom bust cycles. There's a lot of reasons for that, is their lack of real world experience, which we can get into, and I'll just show you just some things to point that out for you. But when we take a look at what the problem that the Fed has put us into is, they were overstimulating the economy. The problem is inflation. What's inflation? Inflation is too many dollars chasing too few products. So the two sides of this are problematic right now. The too many dollars point comes in with a fiscal policy, which, if you take the last round of stimulus, that was not really needed. And that probably accounts for 3 to 4 points of inflation. So if you take the headline CPI and say that's roughly, in the 8.5% range, we're going to get a number on Wednesday too. So probably will be in that range. We would probably have inflation higher than we want, like in the 5.5%, but not at these dramatic levels where it's got everybody really struggling here. But then you have the supply side, and the supply side's really strained. So we know what COVID did. We know about supply chain. We know that when businesses used to do something called just-in-time inventory, that's dead. That was, very, very efficient. I mean, we went through a period of time since 1991 where the world really changed. That was one of the most monumental times in the world, where you had the Maastricht Treaty, you had the Berlin Wall, you had where Russia kind of retreated, the Soviet Union retreated into Russia, and you had this globalization that occurred, where you can get goods, and China became this major exporter. So things really, really changed across the globe. And we went into a period of time where it was an economic world instead of like a world of war and land grab and this and that. So COVID's changed a lot, that we're now seeing is happening around the world. And one of the big things is the supply chain. And then when you look at an already strained supply chain, there's this chart I want to show you here, because people are saying, when does inflation stop, right? So inflation stops rising. People are talking about peak inflation. They're wrong. We're going to get higher levels of inflation over the summer. So we know that inflation drives mortgage rates, because as inflation goes up, it erodes, it makes things cost more. So it erodes the buying power of the fixed payment you get from a mortgage if you're a recipient. So imagine somebody who's got a Social Security check, right? And that's a fixed payment every month. So now they go to the gas station, boy, it's $100 to fill up your tank, and then they go to the supermarket, and that's expensive. So there's all this stuff that's so expensive. And when you take a look at it from a mortgage recipient's point of view, well, if I'm lending out money, then the amount that I'm getting is fixed as a return. So I can buy less with it every month. It's eroding. I can't do anything about the loans I've issued already, but on new loans, what I want to do is what they're doing now. I want to charge a higher rate of return. Correct. Yeah. So I can offset the more rapid rate of erosion by starting at a higher perch. I'm at a higher clip. So that erosion, I'm kind of fighting it off, right? And that's what's happening now. So when does inflation slow down? So interest rates could slow down, and Fed raising rates, that's our help. It's just that the Fed has this really blunt instrument of raising rates. And by doing so, what they're doing literally is demand destruction. So they want to make it painful for you to buy, but that doesn't really alleviate the supply side, So let me just give you a couple of quick things first here. I'm just going to share some slides. And the first one's kind of just to show you on the Fed. I mean, this is just one of the Fed members, Loretta Mester, that's mess at the Fed, because this is what the Fed's been thinking. I'm unconcerned with inflation running away from us. She said this, a year ago. I'm not worried about inflation getting out of control. A year ago, the Fed needs inflation expectations and real inflation to rise. She's calling for inflation to rise a year ago. By the end of the year, in August, this is not 20 years ago. She thought by the end of 2021, she expected inflation to be between 3.5% and 4%. It was already upwards of upper fives, almost at 6% in December. So very out of touch. And it's because
this
every member of the Fed, almost their only job was at the Fed. And this is John Williams, the New York Fed president, probably the most important district that they're definitely the most. All of the asset purchases go through New York. Bullard, who you see on TV, Esther George, Mary Daly, who was like, oh, the Fed should not be hiking. Keith Montgomery from Boston, he's only there because Eric Rosengren left in disgrace, because you know what he was doing, Brian? You probably know this, but he was front running the purchases of mortgage-backed securities, same as Robert Kaplan, who was the Dallas Fed president. So he had to leave in disgrace. And now Meredith Black is there. But all of these people, their only job was at the Fed. Now, aside from either teaching or research, so we call that academia, you have all of these other people. Raphael Bostic's been very, very vocal. So has Charlie Evans. So has Patrick Harker and Loretta Mester, who I just showed you from the Cleveland Fed. That's all they've done. They have not ever had a newspaper stand. They've a newspaper route, a lemonade stand. They haven't done anything. You know what I mean? They don't understand how the real world works. Now, these two have. Now, Lael Brainerd, really checkered past, by the way, with ties to the Clintons and donations and this. So very, very, very checkered past. But both of them, they have worked in the real world. But guess where? McKinsey. And I know you've done your research on this, right? So what have you found out about McKinsey? Let me just put it back to you.
Well, just to let everyone who knows who's watching this right now, I have a little bit of the inside scoop on this. Barry was cool enough to share some of this stuff with me when he's putting it together last week. But McKinsey's it's basically a who's who of companies that have flamed out and burned or torched part of the economy, if not the whole economy, from probably the late 90s on. I mean, it was pretty much everybody. It starts out with maybe even the savings and loan thrift. It's going over to Enron. It's going to 2008. It's going back to your mortgage-backed securities. I mean, they are a who's who of corrupted companies and opportunities in our country. It's terrible.
Yeah, and then let's remember Neil Kashkari, who was on CNBC today. He's just, he's really off the deep end, but he was opposed to rate hikes through 2023. Okay, so I mean we're in 20. So he's saying no rate hikes. So these guys are just, they don't have the experience to help us to get through. That's why the Fed has boom bust cycles. That's why our economy booms and busts. And let's take a quick look at this one, because the people that are telling you, so what we need, first of all, is inflation to come down. If inflation comes down, mortgage rates will come down. And people are saying, hey, I think that's going to happen because inflation's peaking. Okay, the chart I'm showing you here shows you the monthly inflation numbers from 2021. So here's April's number for 2021. We're going to get the replacement of April's number for 2022 on Wednesday. So the way it works is you take the most recent 12 monthly periods of inflation and you add them together. And that gives you a year-over-year inflation number. So if you took from April of 2021 and you went all the way to March of 2022 and you added that all up, you're going to get 8.5%. Each of these and add them all up, right? So now when I get on Wednesday, when I get the number for April of 2022, I replace this number of 0.6% for April of 2021. You with me on this, brother?
I am.
So look, if the number that we get for April 2022 is above 0.6%, which is what it was that it's going to replace, then the year-over-year inflation goes up. If it's lower than this, then the year-over-year inflation goes down. It's that simple, right? So that's really once you know the keys and you got the formula for it, it's pretty much, it's just math. So notice here that they're thinking that inflation is peaked now. Why? because as they look to this month and look at next month, May, that we're going to get in June, and the number in June, which we get in July, these are big numbers. So the chances are that the numbers for 2022 will come in lower than these numbers. And you're going to hear all over that inflation's peaked. Everybody was right, inflation's peaked. No, they're not looking far enough.
Because look at July, August, September.
Look at this. So what's going to happen this summer, everybody? Get ready for a little bit of heartburn, because you're going to see inflation. If we get 0.7, 0.8, I mean, we got 1.2% last month on a 1 month basis, 1.2. So let's just say that, and I'm worried, guys, I'm worried about oil prices, because right now in Shanghai and in China, Shanghai's got 26 million people. They've been trapped like rats, those poor people.
That's crazy.
Right?
Yeah,
So
it's crazy.
they're not consuming energy. When that demand comes back online, it should push energy prices. At least I think it makes sense that it will. So if you start to get 7, 8, 0.9% for these months, that should push year-over-year inflation. Right now, everybody's shocked that it's got an 8 on it. We may be pushing 9 or 10% over the summer. When do I think it peaks? Here. And for a lot of reasons, not just because of the comparisons. So reason number one is the comparisons. Yes, because I think that then these numbers, and even these numbers, they're higher. You start to get 0.7%. You can't push inflation up that much from there, okay? But there's other things at play. One is the comparisons. Two, we already got a 25 basis point Fed rate hike in the month of March. We got 50 in May. We're going to get 50 in June. We're going to get 50 in July. That's a lot. And we'll probably get either 25 or 50 in September 1st. So by the time we get into October, there's a lot of Fed hikes that will have come into play. So what does this do? What is the Fed trying to do with Fed rate hikes? So think about it this way. We know that the Fed rate hikes do not affect mortgage rates. What do they affect? Short-term rates, your home equity lines of credit, your personal loans, credit cards, car loans. So if you start to make that more expensive for consumers, they'll probably spend less, right? So, hey, it's really more expensive than I thought. My car payment, I could have bought the same car, but now that car is going to cost me $150 a month more. Maybe I think twice about buying, so that's called demand destruction. That's what they want to do. But the real area that they affect is those big commercial and industrial loans. I want to build another plant. I want to build an expansion. I want to do this, and I got to borrow $100 million. So maybe I was paying 500 basis points above SOFR or LIBOR or the Fed funds rate. So that was a 5% rate. Well, now if that rate went from 5 to 8, maybe the numbers don't work now. The debt service is too much. So now that's 100 million less I'm buying. That's a lot less buildings I'm constructing. That's a lot less companies I'm acquiring. So all of these things that start to come into play is what the Fed's trying to do. They're demand destruction. Now we're going to go into recession. We were the first ones to call it in July of last year. We said end of 22, early 2023. Everybody thought it was nuts, but yes, we did. Everybody thought it was nuts when I called it in 2019 for the 2020 recession, but we see it, and now everybody sees it as well. So it's becoming obvious because these things will happen. So as the economy slows, remember what is inflation? Too many dollars chasing too few products. As the Fed makes dollars less available because it's more expensive, but also think about this. Right now, if you go to save money, you get very, fractional of 1%. Now, if you start getting 3% in an account, I might save a little bit of money. I might, especially if you're a little bit older and you want a safe rate of return on your money. And there's a lot of wealth right now that people have that they might say, well, you know what? I could get a little bit of an income that's a monthly income if I put my money away. People that want to think about retirement. So I think the dollars leave, but also supply should start to come back, because by October, supply chain should alleviate, and so should this. I know this is not a painting. That's an abstract painting. You know what this is? This is Shanghai.
Is it really?
The port in Shanghai. Now, Shanghai is a port that has the largest city in the world, 26 million people. And you see these ships? These are ships. These are containers. You ever see one of those gigantic, massive, there's thousands of them that are just waiting to either load or unload. and you got the red ones coming in, the green ones going out. So what you're trying to do here is you're trying to put yourself in a position where this bottleneck, hopefully by October, starts to ease and goods start to be transported around the world. Now, you and I have talked about the situation between Russia and Ukraine. That I don't think that's an easy fix, but that will certainly keep supply chains tight. But when you look at a few of these obstacles that are out there, we're in a position that hopefully by October, it's almost like a perfect storm of good things for us that we could start to see some relief. And I think by then, I think interest rates may have reached an apex and should start coming down because inflation will be coming down by then.
But boy, it sure makes for an interesting next few months, doesn't it? I mean, I was having a conversation with somebody. Said, "Well, what do you think about this?" I'm like, I have no idea. I don't have a point of reference where I felt like I've had them in the past. Is that you hear things and it's like, well, maybe it's my limited understanding or scope about how this stuff works, but that seems counterintuitive. So it'll just be interesting to see what happens here. And hopefully you're right. Hopefully come October, maybe we get a little bit of relief again.
It will be, but we're going to get a recession and interest rates do decline during recessions. So a couple of things here. One that I want everybody to know is that the MBA forecasts $2.6 trillion in originations this year. That'll be the third best year in the last 16 years.
So it's a good point. It's a really good point.
I know that it's disappointing when things get a little bit tighter. It's disappointing, but Brian, I always watch your shows and you always have some great advice and great encouragement for people. Let's keep in mind that there is a lot of business to be done. It's mostly on the purchase side now, right? So we just have to adjust our thinking a little bit. But I think there is hope because the recession is not a bad thing at all. Let's just, if I may, can I get a couple more slides real quick here?
Of course.
So let me try and just pull a couple of other things up that I would like to share with us, and let me share my screen since I now have it up. So we know that what the Fed is doing here is these boom bust cycles. So they overcook it to 1 degree, then they go too far the other way. But I'll go back, whatever, in the last 80 years or so, in the 40s almost, when they start hiking rates, they always go too far and we see a recession. That's the darker areas. Then they have to cut rates during the recession. Then they push rates up too much, we get a recession, and then they got to cut rates. Same thing here, then they got to cut. Way up, we get a recession, they got to cut. Way up, they got to cut. Way up, they got to cut. Way up, they got to cut. You know that we have had almost 100% that every time the Fed goes into a tightening cycle, we get a recession. Now, here's where we are here, okay? They're going to pump it up to here. And just like we had the recession here, we're going to happen again. So the Fed will put us into recession. They know they're going to. That's the only way they destroy demand, but they just can't tell us. So it's not too far away, the recession. You're going to get an inversion in the yield spread. Every time it gets inverted, we get a recession, same thing. So we know the signs are there. This was when we called it correctly for the last recession. We're calling it here. And then the unemployment rate's a big one. Every time the unemployment rate reaches its lowest level and turns higher, you get a recession right around the corner. So just watch out for that because you'll probably see that happen. It's 100% accurate, this indicator. So every time we get an unemployment rate that hits its lowest level and then goes up. So are we near that level? Well, let me show you something that's really interesting. If you take a look throughout all of history in the United States, when inflation in the United States for a quarter gets above 5%, there's a 45% chance you get an inflation within the year that follows. So this triggered in the second quarter of 2021, which suggests that there's a 45% chance that by June of 2022, we get a recession. Now, there's another interesting trigger, and that's the unemployment rate. Remember, I just showed you this chart of the job market, right? So when the unemployment rate's below 4%, so you're near that bottom before it's going to start to turn up, right? Well, if it averages below 4% for a quarter, there's a 42% chance that within the next month, you have a recession. Now, that just happened in March of this year. So we just got that trigger. So that suggests by March of 2023, we should have a recession. But listen to this one. When both of these happen coincidentally, When the headline CPI is above 5% for a quarter and the unemployment rate is below 4% for a quarter throughout all of the United States' history with 100% accuracy, and it does make sense because both of them should lead to that, there is a 100% chance, and we just got this in March. So this is telling us that we should feel really, really positive that a recession will be here within the next year, for sure, within the next 10 months, really. And why is that so good? Well, we don't wish anybody bad from recession because what it means is unemployment and people have heartburn. But when I'm talking about this, so please forgive me for using the word good, I mean good from a point of view of mortgage rates, okay? So from a point of view of mortgage rates, it's good because mortgage rates drop a lot every single time. Here, 1% last time, 1 1/8, almost 1%, 2 1/4%, 5%, 4 1/4%. So recessions are good for mortgage rates. And I expect the same thing that's always happened throughout history to happen. And real estate is a beneficiary too. Every recession that we had, home values do good and then go up, do good, go up, do good, go up, do good, go up, do good, go up, over and over and over, with one exception here. But by the way, the last one, they did really good and went up. I expect the same thing to happen because there's an explanation here. We had this recession happen after the housing bubble burst. Why did the housing bubble burst? I mean, look, remember the movie The Big Short, where the stripper owned 5 homes and a condo, and well, that was kind of anecdotally funny, and but it did mimic a lot of what was going on. You had 580 FICOs, non-owner occupied, no income, no asset, 100 LTV, no job. It was a different environment, in which case you also had overbuilding and not enough demand. So
we call those the good old days, Barry.
Yeah. But look, so I'm optimistic, that we will see a good result here. And I think we get through the next 5 months. It's not the end of the world.
No.
Put your head down, like you always tell people, and just keep doing the good disciplines, build your purchase business. Every loan you do today, you're planting tomorrow's refi.
That's exactly my point. That's what everyone needs to understand, that you're going to be doing loans in the 5s and maybe the 6s here. All you're doing is just creating your next market, because right now we have effectively painted ourselves in the corner with all these really super low rates. So you're just creating your next market for you. So, when rates go up, just put a big grin on your face and write that loan.
Yes, because it's not too far down the road that you will see relief. Now, if I may talk about one other thing that I hear is a big issue today, and so many people tell me it's very hard to get par for the customer or a 0-point loan, and in a crazy way, that's kind of good news. Okay, I know it stinks, it's hard, but here's the thing: when you deliver a loan for 0 to the customer, that's not 0. Somebody is paying, a lender is paying well above that. Otherwise, how do you get compensated? Does your company get compensated? So that may be in the area, just to pick a number, of 103, really, or so for a 100 or $500,000 loan, somebody's paying $515,000 for it, right?
Yep.
So 3% above it. So they've got to make up that $15,000, and the only way they make that up is with interest payments that they receive at a higher level. So the reason why you're seeing these big jumps to 0 is 0 for the customer, these big jumps in rates in order to achieve 0, is because lenders are fearful that loan will not be on the books very long. So they want to make it painful and discourage you from doing that because it's very risky. But if you are going to do it, they want to try and minimize their potential loss by trying to recover the differential within a couple of year period or a year period, because they don't think that loan's going to have a shelf life of greater than a couple of years, maximum, probably less than a year. So, we think that it's in a crazy way, what it's telling you is that there's a big refi market coming. So get yourself prepared.
It is kind of for our independent mortgage banks out there. This is kind of a scary time, because they don't want to get caught with a bunch of buybacks on their hands, and that very well could happen, just depending on how quickly a recession hits and rates drop and this whole thing turns around. It'll be interesting to see, because markets in good markets and in bad markets, and you always find those who can who win the markets and those who don't. So it'll be interesting to see. Like I said, pop the corn and just enjoy it. So
Yeah, because there are differences. Look, recessions, I said good for mortgage rates. For people who become affected by them, our heart goes out to them, and it's terrible because there you will see the unemployment rate go up and people will be displaced or lose their jobs. In those circumstances, the risk that you would have to the housing market is that they can't pay their mortgage, with the exception that, as you know, what everybody knows, there's a very big equity cushion, which we did not have in previous recessionary periods, and still the housing market did well. But with this equity cushion that you have, there's a lot of reasons to believe that the housing market will do well during the
Yeah.
impending recession.
well, Barry, with that said, thank you so much for your time today. I hope this helped everyone out. By the way, the last time we did one of these recently, we had a enormous response from it. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but we had a really, really great response. And I think what we did is, or what you did is you put a lot on the table. And I think there's a lot of people looking for a lot right now. And so I like the fact that we have a chance to do a little bit of these deeper dives, because I know that our viewership is going to appreciate seeing where things could possibly be going, and so they can adjust their rudder to affect the course that they're going to go. So Barry, thank you so much again for your time. And I look forward to doing this again soon.
Absolutely, buddy. Thanks for doing such a great job. And for all you guys listening and gals listening, I know that this market definitely is something that can give you an uneasy feeling, but I do want you to know that this is going to get better. Just control what you can control and stay with it. You're going to be handsomely rewarded in the not too distant future with a much more attractive market that will make you very happy.